Good morning. This video is on dispensationalism. Now, if you watch my channel for a length of time, a semi-long length of time, you probably notice that I don't really use that term. Now, do I believe that God has progressively revealed things and that, the church and Israel are different? Yeah, because it's pretty obvious just reading the Bible. Even, for example, the church in Israel being different, like you don't even have to read the whole Bible. You could just read Romans. And if you had no outside influence, if all you did was read Romans, you'll see clearly that the church and Israel are not the same, right? A great example I like to use is Romans 10:1. If you think Israel and the church are the same, then you should be able to replace the word Israel in Romans 10:1 with the word church, and the verse should make sense. But if you try to do that, it's not going to make sense. Try it out yourself. Pause this video and try it out yourself. You're going to see it's not going to make any sense. And, Romans 9, 10, 11, make it pretty clear also that, Israel's not the church. But anyways, but and look, also it's pretty obvious if you just, take the Bible literally, but in context, obviously, you're going to see that, God doesn't want you to marry the biggest whore in town. He told that to Hosea, okay? He doesn't want you to lay on your side for like a year or however long it was, like he told Ezekiel. All those verses in the Old Testament about, taking the land, he told that to Israel. He didn't tell that to Christians, right? And, the Roman Catholics botched that, and that's what the Crusades was about. That they thought they replaced Israel, and they thought that the land of Israel was theirs. Like it was ridiculous because they didn't take the Bible literally. Okay. But look, the term dispensationalists, or the term dispensationalism, and this and the other, and dispensationalists, like who calls themselves dispensationalists the most? It's usually Rabbinites, okay, and that's confusing, especially to new believers. And so that's a reason why I do avoid the term a lot, is because since the Ruckmanites are like the biggest claimers of being dispensationalists, especially like, for example, like Gene Kim, he's really big on that term. So if I were to say I'm a dispensationalist, and you're like, oh, cool, and I'm listening to Brother Nicholas, and then you hear somebody like Gene Kim claim he's a dispensationalist, and you're a new believer, you might think Gene Kim's okay to listen to, and and then you might get introduced to other Ruckmanites, and and then you just might think, well, anybody claiming to be a dispensationalist is okay to listen to, right? And you know, a lot of times when people claim to be stuff, uh, you know, either they're not or they're a straight up wolf, and you learn that throughout your Christian life. For example, not everybody who says they're a Christian is actually a Christian. Uh, Most of them don't know the gospel. Everybody that says that they believe the Bible, when you get down to it, like a lot of them don't believe the Bible. Even people say that they believe they're like a Trinitarian, or like a lot of times you get down to it, like they don't believe the Trinity. A lot of even some people say they're faith alone, and then they start backloading and they're like, but faith is never alone. It's ridiculous. So personally, I like, my approach is teach the doctrines, and then once people know the doctrines, uh, you know, when they hear somebody else talk about something, uh, even if they use a term that might sound safe, but if they if they use a term that might sound safe, but then they teach some doctrine that's false, like um, if you know that if you know what the true doctrine is, it doesn't matter what the other people call themselves. All right, if if they're teaching something false, um, and another person that you know I guess pre-Ruckman that a lot of people uh, associate with dispensationalism, Scofield. Okay, now Scofield. I don't like mentioning him either because he, uh, you know, like the Ruckmanites, he thought that people in the Old Testament were saved by works. Okay, and that's heresy, and it's a form of limited atonement, and uh, and it denies a lot of clear stuff in the Bible, and so I know a lot of people because they were taught at an institutional church. They basically have like uh, a Scofield reference Bible, okay, and his reference Bible. He I've seen some of his notes. I have a friend that has a copy, and he showed me some of the notes, and yeah, Scofield, uh, you know, taught that it wasn't always faith alone. So but people associate him and like Ruckman and stuff with dispensationalism, and especially Ruckman because Ruckman was like worse. Uh, and so like just in my personal life, it has thrown so many people off. Uh, where they to the point where they might not even want to talk to you if you mention the term dispensation because they think of like somebody like Peter Ruckman. Um, that's personally why I avoid the term a lot of times. But again, yes, I believe there's a difference between the church and Israel, a clear difference. Uh, yes, I believe God progressively reveals certain things. If you just read the Bible, like that's pretty obvious. Um, but what's also obvious if you read the Bible is that salvation has never been by works ever, and it never will be by works. Um, you read the Bible, you see that Jesus Christ tasted death for every man, that he's the promised Messiah, that he's promised for everybody, okay, that he died for everybody, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life, that he's the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes unto the Father, but by him. So, he's the propitiation for not our sins only, but the sins of the whole world. Uh, that he died for our sins according to the scriptures, was buried and rose again on the third day according to the scriptures, and you know, that's in First Corinthians. But what scriptures was it referring to back then? In First Corinthians was referring to the Old Testament scriptures. Okay, so yeah, like I did a video yesterday about how the the post tribulational rapture view, how it it basically lowers the power of the cross, and it downplays. Excuse me, that's the word I was looking for. I think because that was the title of the video, but it downplays the cross. Okay. Um, and I gave my reasons why. Uh, one of the biggest reasons I gave was that the post tribbers think that Daniel 9:24 applies to the church, and in Daniel 9:24, uh, one of the reasons that God gives for this, or one of the reasons that the Bible gives for the 70 weeks is you know for reconciliation of iniquity. And look, the Christians have been reconciled through you know the cross. I mean, like we like you can't you can't say there's another reason, that there's another way for reconciliation of iniquity if it has nothing to do with believing on Christ. Okay. And again, it was to Daniel. It said, "Thy people and thy holy city." That's Jerusalem. The church was not given physical land here on earth. But anyways, also, speaking of understanding what people would, I guess, term dispensationalism, another thing important to understand is, you know, when the New Testament began and what's pre-cross, right? Now, and ironically, like the Ruckmanites don't seem to understand that, because for example, Jesus speaking to Nicodemus was pre-cross, but they think that Nicodemus was saved by works. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyways, so yeah, back to the pre-trib versus post-trib thing. I had somebody claim yesterday that uh, that the sorry, but I think somebody's about to come in the door here. It was let me make this quick. I heard somebody claim that most pre-tribbers believe that salvation in the during the tribulation is going to be by works, and then he started mentioning Ruckman and stuff, and looked at Ruckman, like the Ruckmanites aren't most pre-tribbers, okay. And everybody that I've you know that's that hasn't like passed away, but that's like alive right now, that I've ever met or heard preach that in the future it's going to be by works. So they're all Ruckmanites, okay, and they're definitely not the majority of people who believe in a pre-tribulational rapture. And but there it is again, like somebody trying to associate me with a Ruckmanite. I don't want. I'm not a Ruckmanite. Never have been. Never will be. Okay. The first church I ever went to was a church pastored by a guy influenced by Peter Ruckman, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know who Peter Ruckman was, and I never bought in to the Ruckmanite stuff. Like I actually left that church, uh, because they were so adamant that people in the Old Testament got saved by works. I knew that was heresy, right? So I never bought into Peter Ruckman doctrine, and also like if you walk into a church and you don't know who Peter, that could maybe happen to a new believer too. Like I was a new believer and that happened to me, where you just walk into some church, you never know who Peter Ruckman is. The guy was already dead, you know. uh and then these people who say they use the term dispensationalism, and they're you know claiming certain things. There's a little bit of truth in what they say about how, yeah, uh, certain times God dealt with man differently, but then they go to the extreme, and they say, oh, well, salvation, no, it was different. No, it wasn't. Okay, everybody, nobody got saved by their own works. It's ridiculous. Um, but even personally in my life, like because of the Ruckmanites, the term dispensationalism left a bad taste even in my mouth for a long time. Um, where if I heard somebody say that, even personally, like a lot of times I got on guard and think, "Oh, this guy might be a Ruckmanite." Um, but of course, I have also met people, both online and offline, that uh, that claim to be dispensationalists, and they can't stand Peter Ruckman and his false doctrines, and they believe that salvation's always been by uh, faith. It's never been of works, and that's fine. If you want to use that term, that's fine. I'm just telling you what, personally, I don't use that term very much, because just personally in my life, I've dealt with too many people that you know when they think of dispensationalism, they think of Ruckman, and uh, they don't want to hear what you have to say. Uh, but if you just say it without using that term, and you just basically teach you know some of the basics of dispensationalism, you know a lot of times they'll just listen. But it's like the word that triggers them. So anyways, take care. I gotta go take care of my animals.